Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar, and I'm here with Marjolein, who I met in social media discussing sacred womb awakening and womb-centered healing, and invited her to join us on the podcast. So thank you so much, Marjolein, for joining us. I would love for you to share with us how you got interested in sacred womb awakening work, what your background is, what your training is, what your personal experience is, and why you feel it's so important for us in these times.
Okay, so my name is Marjolein, and I started with Sacred Womb Awakening as a journey by myself. I applied to an online training of Diana Beaulieu. She's from Sacred Woman Awakening and based on Ibiza. And I did 8 weeks of a course with her. And for me, that was a life-changing course. It helped me to get in touch to me, to my essence, to my feminine part, because my background was I was coming from a very corporate world. I was in real estate agency, marketing and communication jobs, very well into the career kind of style, and it didn't give me anything. I got 2 burnouts and I really needed to change. So when I started Womb Awakening, I was struggling with depression after pregnancy. I was struggling with a lot of issues about my body, about loving myself, about accepting myself. And so these were the themes I started to work with when I started to join Womb Awakening practices. So this evolved quite quickly because I got hooked. This was for me, I was searching for myself for such a long time, for over 10 years. And for me, this was like the missing link. This was, oh my gosh, I've been doing so much hard work, so much working on my intuition. And this was like, oh, but this helps me to ground. And this is what it's about. This is what I was looking for and I couldn't find. And so I continued and deepened my practices, went quite deep into ancestral healing all beliefs I had been given from my parents, from my family, from school, and started to really feel and tune into, okay, but who am I without all these beliefs? Who am I just as a person, as a woman, without all the labels of the career woman, the successful mother, the perfect fit mom, etc., etc. Who am I without all these labels? And so after completing a 5-month circle here, I decided to apply for the practitioner training as to be able to lead other women into the wombs as well. So this has been a training of a year. We started very intense with a 10-day training here on Ibiza. And oh my God, the whole year has been such a roller coaster of deepening the connection with me, allowing to feel what my feminine energy is and what my gifts were and are, and how much I was in my distorted feminine and in my distorted masculine, and balancing these two out. And it's been about setting boundaries and being able to really feel what it is that I need, and to set a boundary in a loving way rather than in an aggressive way. So everything together, I've been working for about 3 years now with my womb, and over a year and a half, I am leading other women as well, helping other women to find that connection to that sacred center of the feminine essence, of the feminine power, of their authenticity. So that's like really quite a long story, isn't it?
Well, I'm curious about, we're going to lengthen it too, because I'm curious about some of the parts that you shared. I'd like to know more. You were talking about how for 10 years or so you'd been searching, and when you discovered this womb centered approach, it felt like the missing piece. And so I'm curious about what you had explored before, as far as your own personal growth and healing and inner awareness practices? What
Mm-hmm.
were you exploring before discovering womb-centered work that still felt like it didn't quite complete the process for you?
Okay, yeah. So I've tried many different things, but the main focus has been around working with my heart energy and opening my heart. So everything was always around that area. So I started with yoga. I think everybody starts with yoga and meditation. And I did different kind of meditation techniques, like a lot from Osho, lots of dynamic meditations, a lot of shaking to really get into the body. I did a lot of breath work. Holotropic breathing really helped me to really come back in here. I've done a lot of family constellations. I've been seeing a life coach for, I think, almost 3 or 4 years. And I was here on Ibiza. I had a couple who were counseling me as well through this whole transition of being in the head and more being into the heart. So it's been from going from head into heart focused kind of practices.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm curious about the first moment that you discovered that actually your spiritual focus could drop even lower into the womb space. What did someone introduce you to a workshop? Did you have your own inner sense that, oh, wait a second, what about my womb? Did you hear the voice of your womb? Did you read a book? What was your first introduction to the womb as a center of spiritual and emotional growth and focus?
So I've been working with a healer here on the island who has helped me to see the psychosomatic side of my pneumonias, because I had 2 really severe pneumonias 2 years in a row, and she helped me to work through them and to just really to see the bigger picture. And she was the one who said that her womb was telling her something. And I was like, you what? Because I
Uh-huh.
oh my gosh, and she has a name? Does she really has a name? And I was just on some level I was intrigued. And so the name of the lady that she was working with, Diana, I booked a session with her. And at that time I knew her as a shamanic practitioner, not so much as a womb awakening practitioner. And I think there was already the first introduction into the I think the feminine, or but we kept in touch. So she was the one who's leading Diana was also the one who led me into the online training. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was intrigued. I didn't read anything about it. I really wanted to do a live training, and then Diana didn't give any live training. She said, I'm shifting my work from live to online. And I really wanted to do the work, and I was very resistant. Like I could feel like what's the word? Like an inner struggle. Like I want it, but I don't. I want it and I don't. And I feel that inner struggle with many, many women. At the moment, like there's fear. There was fear around connecting to the womb, and at the same time the eagerness of really wanting to connect. So that took me about 6 months, and then once I took the decision to, okay, I'll just do it, it just shifted everything.
So you struggled with that resistance and didn't make the commitment to jump into the work for 6 months. And what roughly and what happened in you that you finally said, you know what, I just need to do this despite the resistance? Or did the resistance resolve itself and then you could do it? What happened?
I think it needed time. I think it really needed time for me. And it was just the right moment, the right time. There was for me, a webinar came up and I applied. I never applied to webinars. And it was almost like the way I look at it, I was pushed. I really received a push from something that's bigger than me to just really do it. I didn't even think about it. I just clicked, yes, I do it. I asked one question, can you help with lack of self-love? And she replied, yes. Like, that was it. That was why I said, and I committed myself to Womb Awakening.
I see. So she had done a webinar that was sort of outside the program or talking about her program, and
exactly.
and you asked that one question, and that was the thing that
short answer.
Right, that was the thing that took you over the edge, that this is what you needed and she can help me with this and I'm going for it. And so I'm curious about if you could give some examples. You talked a little bit about the distorted masculine and the distorted feminine, and how you were discovering those distortions in yourself throughout the process, throughout your trainings and practice. And I'm curious if you could give some specific examples of that. I imagine it shows up in relationship patterns, and that you could tell us a little story, perhaps from your personal experience, that can illustrate what that means. Perhaps one of the most common ones that you find that you end up working with your clients, as well as one that was strong for you. That's usually how it works, is the one that's the strongest for us, then we continue to work with it with our clients, right, and students.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what one or more of those were for you.
Yeah, well, there's a few of them. They are very, very, very private. I share them with clients I've been working with for a longer time. But I will share you one very crucial one that helped me a lot, which is a little bit less private.
Okay.
So I come from a very masculine family. So I've been raised to be the strong one, to be the tough one, to be the knowing one, to be the fiery one. And so this is how I approached. As soon as I started to get into my working life and into my when I finished university, this was what I was taught to do. So I had to chase everything and fight for everything and go after everything. And if you want something, you work hard. And if you don't work hard, you work harder. So that was a very deeply imprinted pattern that I was running. I was running that on all sorts of levels, but I will take it today more on a working level, like on a career level, or on this, how I present myself. So what happened when I finished my training, I was going for it. So I was organizing my first retreats, and I was doing it by myself, and I was completely ready. So the first 5 people were in instantly, and then nobody came. And I tried to go harder, work harder, do more. I was all over internet. I was very consistent, very focused, and nothing happened. And I burned down because I couldn't get on with it. So after the retreats, I got ill. I was 3 weeks completely ill. And I had to look back on what actually happened there. And I realized that I had been so much in my masculine energy and so much in my in my distortions from coming from that energy, that I realized I didn't do anything about my feminine energy. So what's happening here? I had to balance these two out. And I decided to shift it. So for the next programs that I organized, I didn't do anything but keeping my energy clear and clean by really focusing about what am I feeling? Am I in my masculine? Am I in my feminine? Am I running patterns of manipulation? Am I running patterns of being unclear, unfair? Is there some kind of like energy creeping up that I want to control? And I really had to like sit back and work with these two energies to become soft. Because for me, the distorted masculine and the distorted feminine are very much about being soft. Like both of them are really nurturing and supportive and beautiful. But if they out of balance, they become like this. So for me, that has been a huge shift. And this is still how I'm approaching work. I really tune into what do I feel is necessary, what makes my heart sing, what comes from inspired creation. And from there, I start to publish it. But in a very gentle way, not too much, not too pushy, I make sure that my radiance is there and my energy is right, and I am grounded and I'm a clear vessel. That's how I work with the masculine and the feminine. I hope that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to clarify, because in the midst of that, I just wanted to clarify one thing that you were saying. It sounds like you were saying that both the distorted masculine and the distorted feminine can be healed and brought back into balance by softening. Is that what you meant to say?
No, I think when you bring these energies back into balance, softening comes.
So
okay. The result of the bringing that back into balance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so but it sounds part of bringing that back into balance was an important part of it was to recognize that, wow, all of this pushing, all of this intense trying to get people to come to my programs. And I imagine that there were personal life things that was happening into. I speak from personal experience that when we are in that mode, and I've been in that mode from time to time, then that's when we're pushing on our loved ones to do things the way we want them to do. And that can show up in an aggressive way. It can also show up in passive aggressive ways where
exactly
and those are men and women both can have either of those, but I tend to think of the passive aggressive ways as a feminine way, just because that's what the women in my family would do, as well as being aggressive. But the women in my family are really good at being passive aggressive, and it was one of the sneakier aspects of the distorted feminine that has taken me a lot of time to develop practices, because that comes from the unresolved trauma and pain that we keep hidden, and forbidden emotions like anger and frustration that we push down, but they still are residing within us and influencing. We can't bury those things and have them not ooze out to the side, and in some way, whether it comes out as a big explosion at some point because you just get full up and you kind of lose it, and I've done that, or it's oozing out to the side with every little resentment, every little annoyance in our personal and professional lives. And then in the professional life, that comes out with, annoyance that not more people are signing up for my retreat. And so I'm gonna come at the world harder and faster and more intensely to make the people come, right? And that's where a lot of that, and I imagine it was quite a transition for you, coming from that corporate marketing background where it's all about that, and that's perfectly acceptable behavior, in fact desirable behavior, to be out there. And yet most people are like sick of being sold to, and sick of and yet the corporate marketing thinks that's what works.
That's what it's about.
And that manipulating. I mean, I know people, and I've I had to sort of end conversations with people that say, look, if you want to be successful in this world, that's what you've got to do. You know, friends that were in holistic healing, massage therapists, and, you know, people that I would expect to be taking perhaps a different approach, just openly admitting right there out in public that manipulating their clients into signing up for more sessions was an essential part of their business practice. And they're successful. And I'm wondering who is still, well, I know from being falling victim to that approach to spiritual growth practices myself for many years. I know that there can be a certain point in our healing process when that's acceptable, when those kinds of relationship dynamics are still acceptable, because we're sort of still repeating the traumas of our upbringing. And that repetition of the traumas of our upbringing, it has to go on as long as it does until we wake up to the fact that, wait a second, I could choose to have a life that did not include this pain. Or that I could have healthy boundaries that would prevent this pain from perpetuating itself. And yes, it still includes the old pain, but in a sense of attending to it and giving it the healing attention that it needs, instead of perpetuating the wound by re-engaging again and again in the same dynamic in our relationships. So I'm curious how you feel the womb-centered work helps us to liberate ourselves from those kinds of patterns, those self-perpetuating patterns. And you know, if you want to use this example of this intense marketing, I imagine you might have gone through a few rounds of finding it come up again and having that dynamic appear again for you, and then finding a new way to come at it.
Well, I think what's more interesting to realize and to share in this podcast is also that what was below this extremely pushy kind of vibe and being extremely in the masculine, and then the distorted feminine, was that I was feeling like an emptiness. There was so much emptiness inside of me that needed to be filled, and I was filling that in the beginning with everyone around me, like my family, my friends. I needed to have a confirmation of everything. Oh yeah, you do this so nice, and oh yeah, you're amazing. And as long as I was receiving that kind of like feedback, I was growing. And I think it's important to mention this because I can see this with a lot of people, that when you start to look at that, when I started to look at that emptiness and to see what was really there were suddenly tons, like literally tons of possibilities. And I didn't need to do anything but to sit with it, but to accept it, but to feel it. And that's what I did. And that's what I did. And to come back to your question, why this is beneficial or why we should do this work. That was your question, right?
Yeah, well, I had a bunch of questions laced in there. So whatever feels inspiring to you to share about, really, ultimately.
Just sometimes I'm like, la, 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 la.
Yeah, no, I have a gazillion questions always. So please, whatever question you heard and feels inspiring to you.
Well, what I've noticed for myself and also for my clients over the past years is that like the womb is itself, I like to compare it as a magnet. So when you have a pain and trauma still stored in that womb, and you still carry that with you, that's what you attract on some kind of level. So that pain that is still there is being triggered constantly, whether that is being in this overdrivey kind of energy, or being in coming from a very distorted family, and you are being attracted to the wrong kinds of relationship or whatsoever. That's because there's still this residue of this imprint or of this memory or of this trauma that is embedded in that womb area, which needs to be taken out, which needs to be released and seen.
Well, that's similar to what I was just talking about. So thank you for hearing all aspects of that question, because that's exactly what I was asking about, is what your experience is of this repetitive pattern that we can often discover. Excuse me.
Yep.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that your experience of that is that that's from a residue of an old pain, or a dynamic from the family, or something, a trauma that may have
Or
occurred,
deeper.
or deeper.
Yeah, or even from past lives.
Sure.
There's a lot of if we go really deep, then we can even travel back into our past lives where we carry a lot of fear still with ourselves of being unsafe and ungrounded.
And ancestral experiences, I've found, can be, and I'm curious what you feel about this, because as I've gotten deeper into ancestral healing work, I'm wondering if our past life experiences that are so prominent aren't actually ancestral ancestors, because as I've done the math of, after you go back a certain number of generations, you've got thousands and thousands of ancestors, and there weren't that many people around anyway. So at a certain point, everyone is our ancestor. So so your past life is very likely an ancestor, and that might be why it can be so embedded in our cells and in our wombs, because our wombs, how I describe it oftentimes is we have an energetic umbilical cord that stretches back through the ancestry and branches out. I mean, if you've done any genealogy work and you look at these family trees, it's very quickly this complex tree with all of these branches that branch out into infinity, it seems. And so that's a huge web of information that our wombs connect us to. And it feels to me like there's an energy of purposefulness in what lights up for us at any given time, given our current experiences. And so I don't know if I was leading up to a question or not, but I'm just reflecting on that and wondering what your reflections are about that, the connection between past lives and ancestral healing, and what some of your favorite womb-centered healing approaches are to is it the same? Is it that going into that emptiness and finding the possibilities, or what are some of the other ways that you approach these things?
Well, with ancestral healing, I think it's really interesting what you've just mentioned about the past lives being ancestral. It's actually a side that I've never thought about it, but it really resonates. I can really feel that there's a aha moment. So thank you for bringing that up, because ancestral healing is an interesting topic.
Well, it just, it occurred to me because I've worked with past life regression therapists before, or at least one. And I remember having a conversation with this therapist, and he said, "Oh yeah, I can't tell you how many people have told me that Mary Magdalene they were Mary Magdalene in a past life." Well, if you think about someone having a linear soul progression through lifetimes, then that doesn't make sense that many of his clients were Mary Magdalene in a past life, that all these different souls would have had that same past life. But if you think of a past life as an ancestor, then it makes a whole bunch of sense that Mary Magdalene would be an ancient ancestor of many, many, many people now. So it just put that all together for me. So anyway, what were you going to reflect about that?
But I think what you just pointed out is really important when we start to dive into past lives and we start to dig into these lives. What I've noticed as well, and what I'm really cautious with, is that very often we make this past life a big integration in our current life. And what I feel that past life work gives clarity on issues that are present in this life, but it's not always helpful to embody that past life completely. Maybe I don't use the right words, but I think you'll tap into what I mean, because I remember when I started diving into past lives, I was just horrified. I've been burned, and my head was taken off, and I was raped and murdered, and I experienced all, and I was like, oh, this all happened to me. And I got into my victim, like, oh, poor me. And it didn't help me. It didn't help me at all. Mm-hmm. Now I can understand that. I absolutely understand why I can be so frightened sometimes, and why I was feeling unsafe on the planet and on the earth, and because there was all this past life that was still in my womb. Mm-hmm. And it was still there. I was still carrying that with me, in my womb, in my energy field. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to clarify that when we do past life stuff, that it's to clarify things in our lives, to understand, but not to, like, I don't know. I think I've already explained it.
Yeah.
I think you know.
So what that brings
up. I don't know what your opinion.
Yeah, what that brings up for me is when and I'd love to hear how much of this is true for you, but when I work with ancestral healing, what I've been learning about is that our ancestors can be unwell of spirit and of womb, that their spirit has not resolved some of the pain and trauma that they experienced in their lifetime, and that their ancestors experienced, and that there's a repetitive pattern of similar, just like we have in our personal lifetime right now. There can be a repetitive pattern of unwellness and trauma that attracts the same, that's held in that ancestral lineage and all these energetic wombs all along the way. And that the spirits can be haven't resolved that and taken their journey fully into the spirit realm, and are still linking in to the physical realm through our wombs and through our bodies, because that's where it seems like all of that needs to be resolved. And that's a distortion of how things actually work. And so ancestral healing work, the biggest part for me lately, is about asking for the help of the well ancestors from long before all of this terrible abuse has been happening. Ancestors that are well of womb and well of spirit. And they don't all have to be from long before. There may be some that in their evolution, in their spirit, had whatever they needed to fully go into the spirit realm and not be still trying to work things out in the physical body of their descendants, right? And so they can then actually give support and uplift us as their descendants, if we develop a relationship with these well ancestors, and then they can help us, and we can do our own practice of having healthy boundaries with these well ancestors, just like you would with someone in your life, a loved one or an acquaintance that was unwell, that's trying to tap into your wellness to siphon some off, or is trying to get you to do their emotional or spiritual work for them. And like that, you would need to create healthy boundaries with that person. And there's all kinds of practices in the ancestral healing realm where we work on creating, at least that's what I've been learning, creating healthy boundaries with those unwell ancestors, and then nurturing them towards wellness in such a way that it doesn't have to happen in our bodies. And then we can just end up be left with the part that's ours to work through. And that's plenty. We don't need to work through that. And so if we were to apply that same approach to past lives, as though our past lives were like ancestors, then that might address some of what your experience was with past lives, is that, oh, wait a second, I don't need to process the pain of that past life in my body right now. I can have healthy boundaries with that past life, and
Yeah.
take and receive whatever lessons or wisdom, give blessings and healing energy as I choose, in whatever it comes from an overflowing cup from me. And the truth is that healing can often more easily happen in the spirit world, because you're not having to reorganize more dense soul matter, and then once those spirits take responsibility for it and do that in the spirit realm, and it's easier, then they can access a greater spiritual power to then nourish us and support us, which is the way it was designed to be. But just like our parents end up not having a distorted approach to parenting, which puts many children into the caretaker role for the parents instead of receiving healthy nourishment and guidance from the parents. The children are actually, we have generations of children that were parenting their parents throughout their childhood and never really got to receive that kind of support. And so we're having to switch that around and say, no. The ancestors are supposed to be supporting me, not draining me. And the same with the past lives. And so that's the foundation of the ancestral healing work that I have been engaging with. And so I'm curious, what about your ancestral healing work resonates with that, or might be a little different? Or
Yeah, it's slightly different, because the ancestral healing that and the healings that I do are not always going into past lives. That's most of the time is a separate session. For me, at the moment, how I work with ancestral healing is very much to clear the wounds that have been received from the mother and from the grandmother. And the way I work is I clear the womb. We clear the womb here. So if I'm the client, for example, or I'm doing the work, I clean my womb from the ancestral pain that's ready to be cleared, and then I move it backwards. So I make sure that from my womb and energy, my mother, my grandmother, and whoever wants to receive it behind me and needs to receive it, I work through these different lines. And what I work as well with is the first ancestor. So that's the ancestor before the pain, before the trauma, to really receive the blueprint of her inside of the womb, of my womb, so I can really feel her strength, her power, her support, her nurturing, her abilities, which is me as well. And then really feel that sense of self inside of the womb. So that's how I work, in short, if it's like a very standard session, because none of the sessions are the same. But this is basically how I work with ancestral healing. So I think yours is more complex because you have more experience in that area.
Well, I don't know if that's really true, that I have more experience, or that it's more complex. I just talk about it in quite complex ways. What you described sounds exactly like what actually happens in a session for me. And sometimes there's variations, like you say, but there's processes, and for me it's biomystical. So the womb, the biology of the womb gives us guidelines, very visceral guidelines of how this kind of giving back, or disentangling what belongs to the mother and from what belongs to us. And so that's the languaging that I use around that. And because the womb is very good at that, during childbirth, the placenta knows how to disentangle what the mother needs to keep and what belongs to the child, right? And so, but that gets disrupted because it gets distorted biologically, and cause of many difficult childbirth when that disentanglement doesn't happen quite right. And so and it also gets distorted in our energy and in our emotions and in all the systems of our lives, our relational connections, and spiritually, ancestrally. So are activating that biomystical ability in our wombs is more specifically how I describe it when I'm doing sessions like that. But it's essentially just what you described, of saying, okay, we're going to clear what doesn't belong to me, was not appropriate for me to be carrying in my womb. We're going to clear that and give it back to whomever it belongs to. And I love what you said about accessing the first ancestor, or what I call the well of womb ancestor.
Yeah, I love that name.
Right? And the lineage,
Yeah.
to embody and inherit what she has, what she retained, what was not distorted or damaged in her, and her strength and her womb wellness. We get to access that. And so there's just so many variations. So wonderful. I thank you for sharing your reflections about that. So let's see. I'm curious, in a more general sense, given what's going on in the world right now, with the COVID-19 virus, really putting us all on hold and making us all wonder what's really going on, who we can trust, what's true, what's not true. And yet here we are, everyone in nations around the world in a similar position. So it's not like we can say, one particular government is doing this in a particular way, or but here we all are. And this return to the womb, I have my reflections about why that's so important, and I'd really be curious to hear what you feel about that, how it can serve us now to to engage with this womb-centered healing work and womb awakening, sacred womb awakening work, and why that.
Well, first of all, all the womb work is very grounding, and that's what we really need. When you are fully inhabiting and fully living from the womb, you are grounded. And when you are grounded, you are more present. And when you are more present, it's not really important to know what's going on here and there, but you can really feel what's going on inside of yourself. And I think we're being called at this moment to really be present. And it's easy to move out of the present time, to go into the future, what's happening, to go into the past, why is this happening, who can we blame? And I think for me personally, being in my womb space and being in my body keeps me really calm and gives me a very I'm full of trust. It is about because I trust my body and I trust what my womb tells me. So in the morning, when I feel a little bit wobbly, I connect to my womb and I sit with her. And sometimes I use a rattle, and sometimes I use my drum, sometimes I use my voice to activate it and to become more centered. But I'm there with her and I receive guidance to be still, to be calm, to be present. And for me, that I think, if you ask me one thing, what does humanity need? It's presence for me. And what does the womb give you? Presence.
You know what's coming up for me is perhaps to round out the end of this podcast, perhaps would you be willing to lead us in a little grounding presence womb meditation? Are you up for that?
Yeah, of course. Of course I can do that.
I'd love to be held in that way and receive that, and I'm sure the listeners would too. So
yeah, I would love to. I'll be very honored.
Just 10-15 minutes or so. I'd love to.
Cool. Perfect. So let's close our eyes then. And let's set a beautiful intention for this practice, that we are fully grounded into our wombs and into our hearts. And then grounding our womb firmly into the earth. Sending her the gratitude and the love and receiving it back into us. So we can feel what it's like to be present into our bodies. So bring your hands over your heart and start to breathe into your heart. Just really gently. And just inhale through your nose and out, exhale out through your mouth. Really allowing yourself to sink into your heart. Allowing your heart to open. To expand. And to be open to receive and to give love. And then let's bring your hands down to your womb, just above your pubic bone. You can feel this lovely area of your belly where you can cup your hands over and it feels lovely to hold. And you start to breathe in into your womb, into your space. And imagine that with every breath in, you're drinking in light from coming from your breath and coming from your hands. Allowing your womb to drink as much light as she needs. Allowing your womb to open and relax. Maybe you feel a little bit of cramping or some tightness. Know that this is perfectly normal and just breathe more light into her. And then cup your hands in front of you and ask to receive a crystal. And this crystal is going to help you through the whole day to be connected to the earth and to be connected to your womb. And just watch what's being received inside of your hands. What color does the crystal have? What shape? And how does it feel? And just know that this crystal holds the perfect frequency for your womb to be clean, to be clear, and to be in a flow with Mother Earth the whole rest of the day. And when you're ready, you press this crystal inside of your womb. And you plant it right into the center. With a lot of care and love, you place it there. And you feel how the energy of the crystal fills your whole womb space. How it fills every little tiny corner of your womb. How your womb fills with gratitude and joy and love. And then imagine that from your womb is now a beautiful waterfall of lights, this crystal lights. And this waterfall flows straight into the earth. And with every breath out, you visualize and you feel how this light enters the earth. Filling the earth with love, filling the earth with gratitude and joy. And you keep sending this beautiful energy into the earth. You feel how your womb overflows with love for Mother Earth. And how you ground firmly into her. So we're going to make this a continuous flow. So with every breath out, you are sending this beautiful light into the earth. And with every breath in, you are receiving the love and the gratitude and the joy from Mother Earth to you back into your womb. As you breathe out, you send it into the earth. And as you breathe in, you call this energy back into your womb. Creating a beautiful flow of energy between you and your womb, between your womb and the earth. Feel the presence of the earth. Feel the presence of your womb. Take a deep breath into your nose. And slowly exhale out through the mouth. Rub your hands gently and really slowly. Feeling the physical edges of your body, bringing you really back in the here and the now. And when you're ready, open your eyes.
Thank you so much, Maria.
You're
That was
welcome.
lovely. And I'm sure listeners felt the benefits of that as well. And if listeners wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do so?
I've got a website that they can have a look at, and there's contact details on my website.
Okay.
Which is Blissfinderz with a Z at the end.com. And otherwise on Facebook, you'll be able to find me. All my trainings and all my information is always very up to date on Facebook. So that's or through you.
Okay, well, we'll put some links in the description and the show notes here for this show. And as listeners might know, you can always learn more about the Womb-Centered Healing Temple at wombcenteredhealing.com. Thank you so much for joining us here, Marjolein, and all listeners for joining. May we all feel the presence of our womb and of the earth, as Marjolein said in the meditation. May that stay with us, those words stay with us throughout our day. Many blessings, and until next time.
Thank you, Sama.